We've got a new drone out. It's the Mavic 3 Classic. I think DJI kind of spent all their mana when they came out with the Mavic 3 a year ago and then the Mini 3 Pro right after that. It's too fast for brand new groundbreaking technology to come out, so they update their older models. Here is the spec list side by side, so you don't have to Google this to see if you missed anything. Pause if you want to look at this. And with this lighter version of the Mavic 3, here's the long list of what has been removed. Most notably, the second lens is gone, and you're getting it in 2022 instead of a year ago. I want to say for major stuff, that's basically it. And of course, DJI being a loving grandma that slides an extra Kit Kat into your brown paper lunch bag, they always add some funsy bonuses to their old drones. The biggest one to me is night mode. I really like it a lot. You also have an option to get the smart controller with the Mavic 3 Classic. There's cruise control, which is like when you're in a car, you can set a speed and hold it. And Hyperlapse has a preview. There's a regular price, a smart remote included price, and then they give you a drone only option because at this point you're an addict and we know you have 5 DJI remotes sitting in your closet and who needs more. $650 for the Fly More kit with extra batteries and stuff, but what I really think everybody needs is the ND filters. You still have 5.1K footage that's H.265, the camera hasn't changed. Same sensor on this drone, it's a Hasselblad micro 4/3 inch sensor. The batteries are the same, you can swap them out between the other Mavic 3s, thank God. It's the same exact body, the collision sensors are all there. Every smart feature is the same, ISO performance is the same, it's all the same. It's newer, smoother working firmware though, so because they've had a year to practice with this, now we know that out the gate everything works great. The exposure balancing in the software is good enough that you won't be able to tell if something was shot on a Mavic 3 versus a Mavic 3 Classic. I'm not talking about the Mavic 3 Cine because remember that's ProRes. You get some extra features with that one. It's got a 1TB internal hard drive. We're just talking about the regular Mavic 3. I don't know if you're looking for a nice color graded shot or not, but everything that you're looking at is mostly straight from camera. Some of these shots, I've raised the exposure some because they were a little dark. Otherwise, shots like this are straight from the camera and you can decide if you want to change the color or not. So long story short, it's the Mavic 3 minus the things that made it a little bit more expensive that you didn't really need anyway. Phenomenal footage, very distinct to the Mavic 3's look. I would tell right away if something was different about it, but it's the same. DJI kind of went in a weird progression here. We had Charmander, Charmeleon. Everybody was anticipating Charizard, but we got like this mega Charizard with a second less threatening head that only shot in full auto. It left a lot of people in that gap that were anticipating like an $1,800-ish drone that was an improvement in the sensor, better picture quality, maybe higher resolution like 5.1K. But when the Mavic 3 came out and it was too like Super Duty, the Cine version came with a smart remote and ProRes and the extra lens and it just like made it too expensive. A lot of people were left in that weird cutoff and were forced to kind of accept that they were stuck with an Air 2S. So the Mavic 3 left its weight class and started like leaning towards the Inspire 2. I loved the Mavic 3. I was happy with it because I use it for work. So to me, it did everything I needed. But there were a lot of prosumers who were kind of bummed out. And then I think the final irritation was that the Mini 3 Pro came out and that gave you a $150 extra option to have a smart remote with your drone. It's just bananas, $150 more. You get this nice big bright screen. It's such an improvement to the experience. So why did something like the Mavic 3 not have that? So that's the first thing. I'm very, very happy that it comes with an option to get the DJI RC as well. Remember, DJI is learning while they're experimenting with these things, so sometimes they backtrack, but it's to improve the experience for everybody. So here we are, the Mavic 3 with the DJI RC that they've just tested and proven and works really well and people love it. Now this thing is compatible with the Air 2S, the Mavic 3s, and the Mini 3 Pro. I think there is one thing that photographers specifically are wondering in the corners of their mind. Are they coming out with a cheaper version, meaning you have to trade off the aperture control? No. Aperture control is still on this drone, thankfully. That was painful for everybody to swallow, to accept that if you couldn't justify getting a Mavic 3 for that price, you had to step down to an Air 2S, which means you're giving up aperture control. And I love flying the Air 2S, but that does get frustrating having to either switch out ND filters or change the shutter. Aperture control for lighting is really, really helpful. Good to see that they kept that on this one. If you're using the Mavic 3 and you're shooting in H.265, the only time you'd see a little difference is with ProRes. It's easier to edit ProRes. Otherwise, bottom line, same footage, same look. I can do side by sides, but like really what does it matter to anybody if you're looking at almost the same thing? It's the same camera. The first thing I did look for was to make sure that there weren't firmware or software changes with this drone and this camera where the auto exposure feature wasn't gonna look the same as it did before, because with the Mavic 3, I've said it again and again, I hate the sound of that, any kind of auto enhancement, anything. I'm so used to manual everything and shooting in log with bigger film cameras. However, every time I'd film with the Mavic 3, something about it came out crisper and just juicier than footage on smaller drones. It's pretty distinct, it's more vivid. I started to just really like that image, it's very distinct. So right away I made sure that this thing had the exact same auto exposure enhancing, whatever the heck is going on that we don't know about behind the scenes inside the drone. It's all still there, it looks great. So I'm very, very happy to see that in action. You have normal profile, D-Log, and HLG. Never use HLG, D-Log. 90% of the time I'm in normal profile. With H.265 and footage with this much data, anything you're missing you can just adjust when you're editing the color. If you're filming directly into the sunset or something and you want a little bit more control, sure, D-Log, if you know how to work with that, because it can get frustrating. The settings are also different because you have to shoot it overexposed, even though the meter's telling you it's too much, you adjust it later. So that's you save that for your most extreme situations. Otherwise, 95% of the time, normal profile is doing the job, especially on the Mavic 3. Night mode. For nighttime filming, this makes a lot of sense because your blacks, contrast, ISO, sensitivity, and all of that stuff shouldn't be the same in the day or at sunset as it would be at nighttime. Here is me if I had to just film this to the best of my ability, 24 frames per second, nasty shutter of 40, ISO who knows what, not much else I can do to make this look better. And here is night mode. Much less noise. The details are a lot cleaner. Night mode only lets you film in 40K 30 frames per second, probably because the small drone processor is doing so much work managing ISO, calculating the black point, things like that. I can forgive it because it looks much nicer than me doing my best if I had to. So yeah, 4K 30 frames a second. Honestly, I'm just going to leave it on auto because it's doing fine. Whether you adjust the settings yourself or not, it doesn't really matter. You're already breaking rules to begin with, so I'm just going to be grateful that we can film this much at nighttime anyway. If I'm forced to film at nighttime though, I will be using this because normally using that much ISO is too jarring, so this is really satisfying to have. Autel, I made a review on the Mini 3 Pro versus the Nano Plus, and this was the only thing I really enjoyed thoroughly with Autel. Low light filming. Despite the settings, despite the ISO, it was always very clean and full of life. If DJI applies this night mode feature to all of their drones, it's going to be tricky for Autel from the buying perspective of Alex Harris because I can now get that rich low light look somewhere else. Night mode is just for filming video, but with photography, ISO performance is just like the Mavic 3. You can use up to 800 ISO and not really notice much noise because we are now dealing with 4/3 inch sensors. So a more professional look when handling low light and ISO, and it doesn't feel like you're pushing any boundaries on the drone or trying to make it stretch to get any of these shots. It's well within the capability of what it can do. A nice advantage over the smaller drones, which feel like their sensors are stretching to try and get shots like this. By the way, no matter where you are, if you have earth and trees, all you need is a sunset and long shadows. Any photo will come out nice. Don't go test a camera out in the middle of the day, they all look the same. Sunset is much better at bringing out the colors no matter where you live. This feels like the real successor to the Mavic 2 Pro, and it's at a good price too. Nice big sensor, all these features for a manageable price. Really is worth the jump at this point. I do think a second battery is pretty necessary. You can just have a car charger, and then in between shots or locations, you just swap them out. If it's for work, obviously DJI Care makes a lot of sense and people have a good experience with that. They give you a drone back pretty quickly. The wide angle lens I don't know about because I don't have a need for it. It already feels wide enough to me. And of course, the ND filters. I really think you should get ND filters. They're like sunglasses for the camera. You can get a slower shutter so the image looks a little smoother and softer, more cinematic. Otherwise, that's the end. Go away.